and welcome to this week's episode of Mastering Dungeons, your favorite tabletop role-playing game. Lots of stuff. Happy holidays going on. We have a special episode today. We have a guest with us. Dr. Jamie Madigan is here along with Teos Abadia. So start with you, Teos. How's it going?
It's going great. I got all of my gifts wrapped. I just need to do the kind of like little gift envelope-y things, and I'm set. So that is pretty good. I know we only have 2 days to go, but that for me is really good.
Awesome. And now let's forget everything Teos just said. We're really excited to have Jamie Madigan here. Would you like to tell us why you're here?
I sometimes wonder that myself, but yeah. Hey, I'm Jamie Madigan. Thanks for having me on, guys. I write and talk and podcast about the psychology of games, the overlap between psychology and games, about video games, about tabletop role-playing games, mostly over at psychologyofgames.com. And I think you guys have invited me here today because I have a new book coming out that is literally called The Psychology of Dungeons and Dragons, which kind of talks about what the field of psychology has to say about why games like D&D are made the way they are and why we behave when we play them and why we behave as we do when we play them. That's
a good reason. I actually wanted to ask you some questions about my mother.
I'm not that kind of psychologist. Unfortunately, it's usually the first thing. Although, ironically, I do have a couch in my office, but I don't do like mental health or therapy. I'm the last person that you want responsible for your mental health. I'm a different kind of psychologist. So I could come up with a referral for you, Teos. Let's talk so after the show.
Excellent. So in our main segment today, we are going to talk about the book. We're going to ask some questions and get both, what's in the book, plus some questions that Teos and I have as game designers about the psychology of D&D and what you wrote about, Jamie. But first, we're going to get into our usual listener corner and news and commentary section. But I wanted to correct something I said last episode. I said that the D&D exhibit at the Strong Museum in Rochester went into like February or March. It actually ends January 5th. So as of this recording, you have about a week to get there if you wanted to see that. And now I have to change my holiday plans so I can get there and see it. And thank you, Mike Edinger, via YouTube for setting me straight on that topic. So let's get right into our listener corner here. You can send us your questions via Patreon, Discord, YouTube, Mastodon, Bluesky, email at masteringdnd@gmail.com, or just shout out your window real loud. Maybe we can hear you. The first question comes to us from Puzzled by Much via Mastodon. And Puzzled by Much says, in episode 219, Shawn mentioned playing a game to build out the world with players. I'm aware of Teos's collaborative campaign building product, The Quiet Year by Avery Alder, and Microscope by Ben Robbins. Any others that do a good job of creating great fantasy and sci-fi worlds? I racked my brain and I didn't come up with games that were specific to building worlds aside from some solo journaling games. But one of the conceits of Fate games, and they say it right in the Fate core book, is you should be building the world as you build your characters in your first session. Because the aspects that you create for your character, especially the trouble aspects, are going to call back to the world. So your trouble might be wanted by the Assassin's Guild. Well, if you're wanted by the Assassin's Guild as trouble, that's what your world has to have. So the whole game has you creating these aspects together, connecting characters, but also connecting the world. Either of you two have any games that pop to mind, either as specific world building games or games that include a world building aspect?
So I actually have like a whole chapter on this in my book. So maybe this is timely, where I talk about what happens when people get together and build a game together or build like a game world together. And I tell the story about how we used a system called Dawn of Worlds. And I'm not sure like how well known that is, but my DM came in with a PDF of this thing printed out and we went through the process, and it was was one of those where you start with like a big sheet of paper and then people take turns like drawing geographical, like here's a coastline, here's mountains, here's a forest, here's islands. And then you go through rounds of that. And then you go into the next phase where you start populating it with peoples. Like, okay, here's this civilization of elves, and here's these halflings, and here's these dwarves, and so forth. And then you have points that you can spend on catastrophes to say, like, oh, there's a plague that comes through, or there's a societal movement that outlaws divination magic that comes through this city. And you can sort of like mess with each other's stuff. Like, you don't have to use those catastrophes on your things. You can use them on other players. So there's this back and forth, and it's gamified. So there's like rules that you follow to go through this process. And at the end, you have at least a good chunk of a world mapped out for you to start playing in and DMing in. It's obviously for homebrewing. And we did that and had a lot of fun doing it. And we felt very sort of engaged like with that world. And we all wanted to step up and DM parts of the adventure in like different parts of the world. Like, oh, we created this place where the dwarves are being overrun by the undead. That sounds really cool. I've got some ideas. And we all felt, because we were involved in the creation of it, as you often are, like we valued it more. We felt more engaged with it. And we wanted to sort of be there for it. So it was a great experience. And I talk in the book about other studies that say that when you are involved in building something or co-creating something, then it's more valuable to you.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
So some that I'd mentioned, you mentioned Fate. I think particularly Dresden Files has a really nice collaborative world building. That's kind of what inspired my product that deals with the subject. And there is a free version, which I mentioned in my product, that is you can get off a drive-through and check out, that kind of has all that world building stuff in one place. The Without Number series of games, like Cities Without Number, Stars Without Number, Worlds Without Number, those all have an aspect of building the world together. And we even mentioned how the upcoming Daggerheart has a whole chapter that talks about, hey, here's how to do this together, and roll and create the map and figure things out, and how to weave each other's backstory into things. That's a pretty nicely done idea. We had some commentary on what we liked and didn't like, which you can listen to in a previous episode, but the intent of it was really quite neat, and I think useful for a lot of players.
Excellent. Yeah, I think there are a lot of games that are now leaning into that for exactly the reason Jamie said, which is the more ownership you have, the more invested that you are right from the start. And I think that's a great aspect of role-playing games that we sometimes lose because D&D doesn't necessarily put forward that aspect of play.
And like, in fact, to the extent that they want to become like this big brand, it's in their best interest to not, right? To like try to get people to use their stuff instead of coming up with their own.
Yeah, very true. And the second question today comes from Chris G898 via YouTube. This is quite a long one, so hang in there. This is the change to death and saving throws I came up with. I would love your opinion on this, Teos and Shawn and Jamie. Death's Door. Okay, here's the rule. When a player character is reduced to 0 hit points, it isn't killed outright. They are at death's door, falling prone and gaining the paralyzed condition. While at death's door, taking any damage will result in 2 automatic failed death saving throws. You are no longer at death's door once you regain a number of hit points equal to your character level, or you accumulate 3 successful death saving throws. Okay, pretty straightforward so far. Death saving throws. While a PC is at death's door, at the start of each of their turns, the player character rolls 2d12. One die represents hope, the other represents fear. Speaking of Daggerheart. If the hope die has a higher result than the fear die, the player succeeds on their death saving throw and can use an action or movement on their turn. If the fear die has a higher result, the player character fails the death save and gains 1 level of exhaustion. After accumulating 3 successful saves, the PC is stable but unconscious. If a player accumulates 3 failed saves, the player character dies. All right, so reading it through, it sounds reasonable right from the start, but let's really pull some things apart here. My first statement is if you're going to redesign something, I assume this is for 5e D&D. You want to do it either because you're solving a problem or because you want to improve play in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see if this solves problems and adds to play, or if it adds to problems. And if it doesn't solve problems, maybe how could it? So let's say I have a character, whatever, 8th level. They get hit and reduced to 0 hit points. So according to these new rules, I fall prone and gain the paralyzed condition. What exactly does that mean? It means you're incapacitated, your speed is 0 and can't increase. You automatically fail strength and dexterity saving throws. You have attacks against you have advantage, and any attack roll that hits you is a critical hit if the attack goes in 5 feet. All right. Now, incapacitated also has riders to that. You cannot take actions, bonus actions, or reactions. Your concentration is broken. You can't speak, and if you're incapacitated when you roll initiative, you have disadvantage on that roll. Okay, so that's a lot.
Yep.
Now, if we start to think about how this flows, then we see some problems right away. So this rule said if the hope die has a higher result than the fear die, the player succeeds on their death saving throw and can use an action or movement on their turn, which is contradictory to both incapacitated and paralyzed. So this rule that you're proposing, are you ignoring the fact that you're incapacitated and paralyzed and can take actions nonetheless?
I would guess that's
going to be
I would guess that's the intent. Probably a safe assumption, right. But yeah, you'd have to work on the wording to make that absolutely clear.
Yeah,
and then when that ends, right? Sort of the start end of ignoring the being incapacitated and paralyzed.
Right. So when you get hit, you fall down, you're prone, and you have these conditions. So if you fail, if you make your save, even if we say we're going to ignore those riders, and you can take an action or a movement on your turn, does that mean you can stand up? Does that mean you can use any action whatsoever? Because now you're getting into this strange idea where you're supposedly on death's door, but you're actually getting up and moving around. But then what happens if you fail? If you don't do anything to heal yourself and you fail the next save, are you still up? There's this many things that could happen in here.
Per the rules, you wouldn't be able to stand up because that would take using your movement. So, and it says or, so action or movement. So you could either stand up, but that would not do much for you. So you would either crawl because you need to get to something, you got to pull the lever or something like that. Or you're going to take an action. So if you have an adjacent enemy, you could attack them from prone, or you could fire a bow or whatever ranged weapon if you have that. But you might conceivably be in a situation where you can't really do anything. But maybe you crawl to cover or something like that.
Yeah. But you're still
out
at
of
0
the fire.
hit
That could be useful.
Right, you're still at 0 hit points technically.
Yes,
according to this rule. Okay. And then if you fail the death save by rolling higher on the fear die, you gain a level of fail the saving throw, gain a level of exhaustion. What's the exhaustion doing here? Is it if you're using the 2024 rules, this is a -2 on all D20 tests going forward. Is this exhaustion meant to challenge the character later? Right. So if they fail 2, they're at -4 on all those things. Is that meant to punish them later? Why have that exhaustion there at all? I'm not saying yes or no. I'm asking asking the question. Am I missing something, or is this just confusing right now?
No, so I think you're getting at an important part of design, which is what the intent is, right? And you said that earlier, but I think this reveals itself right here, which is that it's unclear what exhaustion should do here. And I've seen a number of DMs house rule some level, some integration between exhaustion and having death saves and going unconscious. Like a common one is that if you went unconscious in a battle, you gain a level of exhaustion. Just one, right?
Mhm.
I think what this, and so it's a good question whether the point here is to say, hey, we want to recognize that you went unconscious, and we want to say that that has teeth to it. It has, you should not like that, right? You don't just brush it off like you might with regular 5e and say whatever, I was unconscious, doesn't matter, because exhaustion does matter. Just that -2 is something you'd want to avoid. Incentive wise, what it would mean is now that you've got exhaustion, you're just on failing one death save, you would want to get out of that because you don't want -4, right? I mean, I don't think any of us wants to run around playing a character that's at -4 to things, let alone all the other possible things that come out of the system. But you would want to get cured out of that state, and that means someone would have to heal you for your hit points, which at some levels could be a little challenging. Like, it's really easy at level 1, any healing does it, but level 10 to 20, you've got to have a spell that you can't just do a throwaway thing. You've got to do reasonable healing to get them up. So that means expending resources, which is a cost, right?
Yeah. And Jamie, I think in the book you talk about players wanting to feel competent.
Yeah.
And at some point I would look at this and say, I would rather not risk a -4 going forward than I give up that action to not have to make that death save if it meant I didn't have to play the rest of the adventure at a -4 on everything.
Right. Yeah. Or you go back to town and it's heal up and get rid of that condition time, and that is a huge speed bump for whatever the DM had planned. But you're talking about competence and being able to act. I seems like this is trying to solve that issue where it's like it's giving the player something to do while they're downed, right? Like they can't act, they can move to cover, they can quaff a potion, they can do whatever. So it's reducing that very bad feeling of like, well, I can't do anything but make one die roll to try to make a death saving throw. So it keeps me playing the game while I'm doing it.
Yeah,
it just seems very complex.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Like if you're the cleric, you could actually cast mass heal or something that heals you. So you might actually be able to end the condition on yourself, or drink the potion is a good question because maybe taking it out requires an action you don't have.
And presumably you could do a bonus action.
Well, it doesn't say that. It doesn't
say bonus action.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you're technically still incapacitated, paralyzed, but you've got an exemption here to take an action. So you'd want to clarify that, right? Can I draw a potion out of my backpack? Can I even, grab something that's on the ground next to me is unclear because you're technically incapacitated and paralyzed. But I like what you're thinking. I mean, and I think that's what's in the intent here. That is what I like about this is that idea of I could still be invested because there's a chance 50% of the time that I can do a thing.
Yeah. And for me, that's what you're discussing is the crux of it is I have no problem right now with the way death saves and dying works, because while the player does not get to act, if the game is moving at a good pace, you just make that roll. People are excited. People are not enthralled by it, but they're like, there's anticipation. And then it's, nope, I failed, move on to the thing that maybe someone will heal you next. Adding complication to this idea of this death save or death store is, yes, you do get to act, but if it's all sort of a negative, if it's acting from a place of weakness as opposed to a place of power, for me, it's still a feel bad thing. It's, if you failed that death save, then it's still no better than rolling a death save and either succeeding or failing.
Yeah.
I would look for a way to keep it fast, but give the player some sort of agency to try something or to do something. I don't know. it's a tough one
Yeah.
because you want this to have teeth, but you also
Mhm.
don't want this feel bad moment.
Yeah, it could be
Some
fun
moments
to
are feel bad, though.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, that's
right.
true.
Well, and I liked in one of your blog posts where you were talking about that whole idea that if you have a positive and a negative, the negative is viewed as a greater loss, as a greater impact, and so you have to be a little bit careful with that in design as well. Yeah, you got to act, but at what cost through these rule changes? But I think this is a fun way this would be a fun thing to play test and try out with your group and see how your group likes it. And if you're going to publish it, then you would need to play test it more widely, because I think people will differ a lot as to how they would see this particular set. And I think that, we haven't talked about the last bit of it, which I think would need to be clarified. The 3 successful saves. You're stable but unconscious. I didn't expect that. I think because of the fact that you've been acting, then 3 saves made me think like, I don't know, I would be able to keep acting, but instead you're unconscious.
Yeah, it's like you just collapse, and now you have even less agency, even less ability.
The 3
to do something.
failed saves, you're dead as usual. But I didn't expect that sort of stable but unconscious on 3. I would have thought you keep on going, and I think that with the exhaustion, you could argue that maybe keeping on going isn't the problem.
I've seen other games where you can act, but the act of taking that action gives you a failed death save. So you're making just a choice. Do you want to act? You can. Oh, you fail 1. Oh, you want to act again? And then you can give that without having all the die rolls, without having all the things. It's just a choice, and the player can choose their own feel good or feel bad moment by depending on what they do.
Yeah.
And the last question I had was, why 2d12? Instead of any
simple.
other. Why is that? What's that? Oh,
to end the anti D12 tyranny that current games have.
Okay. No, but I started thinking, if you could do 2d6, and if the dice match, then something happens, and you can play with the odds. Then you could do a d4, and if the 2d4 come up the same number, you have a 25% chance of something happening, and that gives you right now it's a 5% chance on the d20 that you can roll a 20 on your death save. So you could use a d4 and have a 25% chance. You could use 2d6 and have a 17 per 16.7 or something percent chance. You could play around with those dice to the difference between the two becomes the number of death saves you fail if you use a d4 or a d6. You can do some really strange things with that. It does become more complicated, but you can have fun with math, I guess.
Yeah. I'm guessing the reason it's not roll 2 d20s for the hope and fear roll is that you don't have those affected by conditions that are already in place to affect your d20 rolls. Like your exhaustion levels, for example.
Yeah, that's clever.
So it's not like compounding each saving throw you fail. It gets harder to get a success.
Great point. Yeah.
Yep.
Good call.
So thank you for those questions. I hope that was a somewhat useful game design talk there. Now let's jump into our news and commentary section. We're going to start with an Unearthed Arcana article that gives us a new look at a potential 2024 Artificer. This Unearthed Arcana article dropped last week. There's an accompanying video that sort of goes through it. We have also 4 revised subclasses: the Alchemist, the Armorer, the Artillerist, and I guess they ran out of A words, so we went to B with the Battlesmith. We also have new spells and new magic items. Teos, what did you think of this new Artificer?
It's a complete go over. Like they've tweaked all kinds of things. It's one of those like picky, we prodded and picked at this thing and changed a little bit of everything. Almost no feature went by without some little tweak to it for some reason that they foresaw as important, apparently. And for a playtest, I think that's probably great. Like, you already know what you have, so make some changes and see how people react to it all. They've changed magical tinkering to create mundane items that last an hour. And you can do that a number of times equal to your intelligence bonus per long rest. There's a list of 26 items that you can create. So if you need rope or you need, whatever, some other item, common item like that, you can fabricate that. And you can do it as a magic action. So it's a very quick thing. You're now able to switch a cantrip. And Jeremy Crawford in the video made a point of saying that this switching a cantrip after a long rest is sort of like the wizard. And now that all the int casters can do this. I thought, okay, all right, interesting. You can replicate magic items, which is a change to the what used to be called infuse item feature. And you have magic plans that you choose out of a list. And so you have 4 plans for creating magic items. And during a long rest or after a long rest, you can create 1 or 2 items. If they need attunement, you're attuned as part of this. And they last until a few days after you die, which is interesting. Or if you exceed the maximum number, then the oldest one will vanish. And that list of items is different based on what level you are. At certain level areas, you get like a new list that you can pick from. And then there's some things they play off of that. Like at level 6, you can drain one of the magic items to gain a spell slot based on the rarity of the item that you've just removed from your replicate magic item list, or from your items that you created with replicate magic item. Flash of Genius is reactive when an ally fails an ability check or saving throw rather than when someone's going to attempt it. I don't know why we have to be so hung up on the failure. I'd rather it be reactive than not, but I would like the opportunity to say when it's a roll you don't like rather than a failure, because there are still things like opposed checks, or if, it's an adventure scenario where it's like, if you get this level, you get the minimum information, this you get more. And D&D seems to never recognize that in 5e. Like it seems to always just be failure or not, or before the roll. And I think that's really cool when you want a higher level and you can bump that up. And then there's some other stuff. The spell storing item can now include level 3 Artificer spells, level 20 Soul of Artifice. The capstone feature no longer requires a reaction to cheat death. It restores you 20 hit points instead of 1, and it does so by draining one of those magic items you created. And then it has some other abilities. The subclasses have all been tweaked as well. I immediately looked at the Artillerist because it's kind of absurd, this constant bombardment of temporary hit points. So I was sure they would fix that, and I was wrong. What they did do instead is that now an Artillerist is even stronger, because you don't just create like a type of Eldritch Cannon, like it's the temporary hit point one. You can every round change what it is. So that's powerful. The new spell is summon a little kind of flying servant. It's kind of cool. It can deliver touch spells. And then there are a bunch of magic items. The one that stood out was a ring that lets you expend a charge as a reaction when you fail a con save to maintain concentration, so that you can succeed on that save. And all of these are new magic items for the game, in addition to ones that they can craft.
Jamie, did you have any thoughts on the Artificer?
I like it in general. I played an Artificer in a campaign once up to like a level 11 or 12 and was kind of underwhelmed by it. It seemed like an artillerist, of course. So I had the constant, and all I did was just give people temp hit points like the whole time. It's like 1d8 plus your level or plus your spellcasting modifier. So significant, especially if you have everybody in that area of effect. But I didn't have I didn't have a bad time. I just didn't have a great time playing with it. Which is too bad, because I think the idea of this class is so much fun. Yeah. And in the following campaign, I found out that I could have the same effect playing a transmutation wizard and just reflavoring all my spells. So that instead of like casting Scorching Ray, I threw 3 vials, out that did fire damage. And my DM was cool about that and was into it and had a good time. So I like a lot of the stuff they have here. It still feels like my main complaint with the class is that I am somebody who just gives things to other people, and I don't get to like do the cool stuff as much. Like I can give a +1 shield to the Paladin, and that's really powerful at level 2. It's pretty awesome. But the Paladin's the one off having a good time with that, shield or weapon or whatever it is. And it's the same thing as the infusions from the 2014 version of the class. It's the same issue. It's a little bit more flexible here, and they seem to be focusing on versatility and flexibility. So I like that you're a walking sentient, what's the magic item? Like Cloak of useful objects or something like that.
Yeah,
Like
the robe of useful items.
yeah,
Yeah.
that like lets you just like, oh, here's a wrench, here's some ball bearings, here's a 20-foot rope. You know, just pull things out of your pockets. I almost said somewhere else, but it's
Yeah, I mean,
that's cool.
I would argue though that one of the things that happens in D&D is equipment kind of never matters. So when you make your feature, you can make equipment. I don't know, like like I think, but I would like D&D to be a game where equipment matters more often, and then this would really shine, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, but it is
almost
neat concept wise.
Yeah.
This is almost codifying the idea that like, let's just assume that you bought the equipment back in town last time you were in town and that you have it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like, it's funny, right? Like the idea of like, I'm going to summon rope, but everybody has rope in their pack.
Yeah.
Right. Like, we're not going to do rope.
And I feel like equipment doesn't matter, but I feel like magic items can and often do, which even makes it worse for me because I've gotten to the point in my game career, and this is just a personal thing, where I feel like magic items, they end up making the stronger, more competent player more competent, and the sort of casual, not really versed in every single role player less. And so you're just widening that gap. So the party that knows that, oh, at 14th level, we can make a rare wand. Well, the perfect thing for this player is going to be giving them this wand. So here we go. And we're just building the absolute perfect combination, which doesn't hit me in the great play spot right now in my life.
Yeah.
I want it to be more spontaneous, more off the cuff, more let's keep it in now instead of being in the, in the book or online going, oh, look at this wand. This will be perfect for the paladin to do this with.
What do you two think about if instead of giving you mundane equipment, it gave you advantage with some item of equipment? So you make it better, something like that.
So you're saying like with your thieves tools,
I give it, little tiny spikes that will like feel out the, I don't know, whatever, the tumblers inside the lock or something. Almost like I improve on your equipment.
I would like it. I would like if it wasn't so easy to get advantage already.
That's true.
Because the current rules are if you have proficiency with the item and proficiency with the skill, you just get advantage automatically.
Yeah, that's true. The 2024
Artificers did a lot of tool proficiencies, don't they?
Yeah.
And they have I think 3 + 1 or something like that. 3 stated and 1 extra.
As I was reading this, I was thinking this would be a great subclass for the rogue or for the wizard. Right now we have a rogue subclass that gives you a lot of wizardy things. What if there was a wizard subclass that gave you some roguey things? And I would rather see this rather than its own thing. Just focus on that.
Yeah, I guess I think there is a place for that sort of, especially if you go back to the kind of original Ebron concept of I can create temporary things and I can enhance things. I think that is neat. That is a neat play space. It's a tough thing to do in the game, right? But I think it is a cool thing that players would like to do. But like Jamie said, it's got to have some payoff for you. And so if all you're doing is just like lending, if you're a lending library, that's actually a step away from the fun of being a cleric that casts bless, right? It's a little more, it's even more distant than that. Like bless is one of those things that a lot of times you can just quietly tell yourself, yeah, you hit because of me. But this is even more removed than that, right? It's all me. I did 400 points of damage through you. Yeah.
True.
All right.
Any other thoughts on the Artificer before we move on?
Well, I do want to say I noted that this is the first playtest content since 2023, and since 2022 if you don't include the one D&D playtest. So it's been a while since we've been in this kind of, hey, playtest a thing that will be in some future product, right? So, and the survey will open by the time you hear this to collect feedback.
All right.
And I thought it was interesting the ways that the 2024 rules sort of forced changes or sort of de facto presented buffs to this class. Like the potion making subclass for the Artificer is just more powerful because you can drink potions as a bonus action now.
Yeah. Sure, I didn't think of that. Well, you can get that article on D&D Beyond right now. Next, we looked into a secret level. The Netflix show Secret Level. The very first episode was the D&D one, and I think everyone here watched it. So, what do you think? And potential spoilers for the first episode of Secret Level. So, you've been warned.
Yeah, what did you think, Jamie?
I thought it was neat. I've watched most of the episodes, and it's an anthology, so they're all unrelated to each other. Mm-hmm. They each focus on a different game. The D&D one was the first, which is probably for marketing and reasons to try to lead with the big gun. It looked amazing. Like the quality of the animation was great. The only complaint I have there is that the gnome wizard character was kind of uncanny valley. Like she had this human-sized head that was photorealistic and this teeny tiny gnome body, which I was like, I don't like that. I don't like looking at that.
Fifth edition can't figure out gnomes and halflings to save themselves.
Yeah. But it was cool. It's not what I think of when I think of like a movie or a video about D&D. It felt like a fantasy, story set in the D&D universe, which is probably what they were going for. But something like the D&D movie felt more like D&D to me, or even like Legend of Vox Machina, those kinds of things. They have more of the flavor of playing D&D. But it was fun to be like, oh, I recognize that spell, or I recognize that ability. Like, oh, that's Lamwood's tiny hut that they're all chilling out in. And this, then I was like, oh, the Lich is like counterspelling twice, and I'm like, that takes a reaction. You only get to do that once. So kind of the rules lawyer in me was
stat block.
Yeah, exactly. That's a magical power. It's not a spell. But I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and there's some little finicky things, right? You're like, that spell doesn't. What is this cone of fire/fireball you just pulled off? Or why is Leomund's tiny hut not transparent on the inside? It should be transparent when you're inside of it. But those things are fine. I don't particularly care about those things. I thought it was interesting how much they tried to pack in like 12 to 17 minutes of it. It's all fast and furious, even when it's like people talking. You talk long enough and someone's going to stab you because it's got to be action packed. And they fit in like they're trying to do like what every character does, what their species is, what their whatever. And so it's like the first time I watched it, I thought they were fighting werewolves, but then I realized, oh, that was the druid shape changing.
Yeah.
And the cult of the dragon, and they pack in all these spells, they mentions of artifacts, that they throw in there. They speak in Draconic, and I actually tried to find like Draconic translators, and some of it I could translate. So I don't know where the whole book of Draconic is that they used for this, but some of the words were actually online. I could find them and translate them, which was kind of fun.
That's cool.
Yeah, there's just Easter eggs in there, or was it all pretty much?
No, it was all reasonable things. Like one of the words was weak, and kill them. At one point, Tiamat says kill them when Solon stabs. The Draconic translates to kill him. Amida Stahi. But I thought it was really neat. It's a little. I mean, it's like up here story wise. And someone on our Discord said this comment that I thought was absolute accurate. They're like, it's as if a kid wrote this. Right? This is a kid's adventure. And then Tiamat bursts out, and you're like, oh, okay, sure, kid. All right, what do we do now? And you're like, well, we'll end the session there. Like, all right.
I kind of thought that was awesome, though. I turned off all critical brain, and I was just like, okay, let's watch. This is cool. Yeah, this is cool. And the plot was simplistic, but you as an experienced story creator or story absorber knew what was coming, right? Mm-hmm. You knew as soon as they got this person where they were taking him, okay, this is going to happen, but they didn't know it.
No, true.
right?
Yeah.
And so there was that moment of tension where like, oh, they're going to take, and this is going, oh, I know what's coming. And so it was sort of cool for me to like see that happen.
Yeah. I thought the Warhammer episode, for those that watched that one, was a little better. Like, I thought it did a better job at delivering the story of what's happening. And it had that same level, like, everything is very epic, but it was, like, from the beginning, sort of deliberately so. Like, right, you guys are going in to die. And so I highly recommend that one. I thought that one was great. And the, you know, and I would imagine, I don't know, because I'm not a Warhammer person, but I would imagine that if you're a Warhammer fan, you were like, oh, that is sweet. At least that's the way it felt to me as a non-Warhammer person.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, so a thumbs up with some, go into it knowing that you're seeing a very short and punchy thing.
Yeah.
We have a sighting in the Cyberpunk 2077 video game. That sighting is the role-playing game. Teos, tell us what that's all about.
Yeah, so a recent patch didn't announce it, but added to your folder the basic rules for the Cyberpunk Red RPG. And so if you look in your bonus content folder, if you have the game, then apparently you'll find the basic rules there. And that is kind of fun, almost Easter egg-like fitting in of this thing. So if you have those basic rules, it means you've got a set of 5 pre-gens, some rules, and a quick adventure that you can run, which is kind of neat. I kind of, maybe it works to do it on the sly and gets people talking about it. I don't understand marketing in that way. I would have preferred that it be advertised, but I think it's a fun idea. Like, Baldur's Gate could have done that, right? Just like, hey, we were installing a patch, don't know what's in it, and then you find on your folder as, the basic rules. It'd be cool.
That's cool. Don't mix your RPG with your video game. It's a matter. The end of the year means that we get a lot of what happened in this company in 2024, and we got one from Wolfgang Bauer sharing Kobold Press's year. He drew a contrast between 2023 and 2024, even though because 2023 was their biggest Kickstarter success, 2024 seemed to be a slower year. 2024 focused on finishing and delivering the Tales of the Valiant books. He said that they remain strong sellers, with the Game Master's Guide selling out its print run. What else did Wolfgang share, Teos?
Well, he talked about having 3 titles on D&D Beyond, with more to come in 25. And, my understanding from talking to folks is that has been a nice source of revenue for these companies. So you can see why they want more there. Of course, has not held Kobold Press and even Wolfgang himself from at times doing some digs on their partner, but he did not do so in this blog post. They held their first convention, which was free to attend, raised money for a game design scholarship through that. They mentioned partners, including Lazy Wolf Studio, who have helped release more than 39 adventures for Tales of the Valiant. But he did kind of, again, like you said, bring this contrast in and say that, quote, things are not entirely rosy here, though the company is in the black. And that's one of those things we talk about over and over again on the show, right? Like, where you think this company is just going gangbusters, Tales of the Valiant was such an enormous success, they must just be rolling around in dough. And, well, they are happy to be not in the red, right? But they wish it could be different. And one of the things they brought up is Kickstarter is 45% of our yearly revenue, and we've seen revenue from other sources decline. And I think he said also decline. So it suggests sort of maybe Kickstarter overall is dropping for them, which we've heard from others. Other sources of revenue, like virtual tabletops and distribution in hobby stores, have slowed. So revenue is declining year to year. And then he ends by talking about the dark clouds of tariffs and trade wars, which could absolutely impact printing and distribution. And not in our show notes, but Penny Arcade just announced that they are no longer going to sell outside of the US because of this. They kind of looked at all the new trade regulations and just were like, this is too much. It's not worth it. So US only.
Yeah.
It might have been North America only. I forget which way, but
yeah.
Along those lines.
Well, it might be US only,
yeah,
depending on how the political winds blow, but yeah, it's going to be a tough year if everything falls the wrong way. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that. And you did mention the Kickstarter. The total revenue of Kobold Press for 2024 was 1.1 million. Their Tales of the Valiant Player's Handbook did about that last year. So that shows their revenue. I think they said 52% lower. So yes, that will be something that all companies will hopefully be keeping an eye on.
Yeah.
Speaking of other companies, Draw Steel has its core rules out for their patrons. It's Packet 4, which the MCDM patrons received, which contains the entire core game, according to Matt Colville, who went on to say, from here on out, we just polish and balance things, fix ambiguities, fix balance issues, more editing, but apart from whatever products might come out after the core rules, this is it. And if you are a patron and can provide feedback, you have until January 13th to do that. And we have a link to their Patreon in our show notes. We say goodbye to a video game that probably no one's played. Dark Alliance. The Dark Alliance video game will officially go offline and be removed from storefronts in February of 2025. This reflects a dwindling user base and a game overall never doing very well. As soon as I saw it, my daughter and I played the original Dark Alliance games on the PlayStation, and we were so excited that this new Dark Alliance game would come out. And we looked at it and went, no, not for us.
Yeah, that's a shame.
Yeah. Jamie, you played it, it looks like?
I played it a little bit and then sort of came to the delayed conclusion you did of this is not for me. This is not real fun.
Yeah.
It's just always interesting when these kinds of games get retired and like what happens when you own a copy of it, or what rights do you have to that content, and it just kind of goes away.
Well, I don't want to contradict you fine fellows, but if I pretend to be the Hasbro CEO, I have to tell you you're incredibly wrong. Video games are our future. They will bring nothing but success to this company. They're not risky at all. So much better than movies.
Yeah.
Forget about that Dark Alliance failure. Let's move along. Nothing to see here. Please disperse.
Nothing.
Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, Baldur's Gate 3.
Everything will be Baldur's Gate 3.
Everything will be Baldur's Gate 3.
Well, Baldur's Gate 3 was a great success, and you can predict the big success of 2025 by going to EN World, where they have a poll, which they do every year, to vote for the most anticipated role-playing game of 2025. You have until January 2nd to vote, and the results will be posted after that. Teos, you voted early and often?
Yeah, well, only once, but I held back. I voted for 13th Age, 2nd Edition, Draw Steel, and Daggerheart, though Trail of Cthulhu 2E is right there. I'm just less of a horror person, but I love the Gumshoe system, so that was exciting. I don't know if anybody has anything else that's not on my list that they're excited about.
I didn't look at this. Was there a list of things you could vote for, or could you write in your votes?
So you could before. The way EN World likes to do these things, they force you to pay attention. They're tough that way. There is a submittal time when people can submit what they're excited about, and then that closes. And of all the things that were named, then that gets thrown in for voting. So there are a whole bunch of things. There's a Goodman Games things, a bunch of Free League like Alien, the Ars Magica Definitive Edition, Ashes Without Number. What else? A Cosmere by Brandon Sanderson's team. Cairn 2E. There's the new Conan. Dolmenwood. A lot of people have talked about. There's a new Gloomhaven. So there's a bunch of stuff there that's it's a big list. The Monty Python RPG, there are a number of things that got named and put on here. Planet of the Apes, Terry Pratchett's Discworld. There are a number that are on here that you may like. It's worth looking at the list because it's kind of fun to remember. Oh yeah, all that stuff is coming out.
Yeah, I the box set I assumed was the game, and then I guess Alien is not out yet officially.
Well, they're making the new version, right? So this is the 2E version.
Gotcha.
That's coming out, and sometimes you get things that because it's really like what people vote for. Like I think Shadow the Weird Wizard won 2 years in a row, right? Because it was like anticipated, and then because it was going to be a Kickstarter, and then anticipated for the release and something like that. So yeah,
that's true. That's true. Cool. All right. Well, that's our news and commentary segment here.